The job of a founder, especially early in the business, you wear a lot of hats.
We've secured 14 customers. From those 14 customers, 90% of them have come back.
The bedrock of any sustainable and successful business is having a foundation of referrals that are coming in.
Some companies are using kind of generative AI to create their documentation.
Having the perfect marriage of marketing whilst also having an engaged client base as well is the key for scaling and growing the business, right?
The most important metric is that repeat customers. If you bring someone in because they're an expert in a particular area, is to trust them to do the work.
Welcome to the podcast From Cold to Close. My name is Saeed and I'm the founder here at SRC Growth Partner, a growth company that helps professional services firms from around the world increase their revenue and profitability by acquiring new clients. My guest today is Damien Tiller, founder of TQC, a compliance consultancy that's rewriting the rulebook for how startups and small businesses approach quality and regulatory standards. With more than 16 years of experience in senior quality and compliance roles, Damien has successfully guided organizations across diverse industries through ISO certifications, audits, and integrated management system implementations. Under his leadership, TQC was awarded a 2025 Global Recognition Award for exceptional achievements in professional services. His approach is defined by a balance of technical expertise, practical solutions, and a people-first mindset that supports organizations in achieving both compliance and continuous improvement. Damien, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that lovely introduction. It's great to be here and great to meet you.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I think it's really interesting what you're doing over there at TQC. But I guess the best place to start with any conversation I always find is giving the viewers and listeners an opportunity to understand who they're listening to. So based off of that, maybe you can share a little bit more so about yourself. What inspired you to start TQC and how has your vision shaped the business over time?
Sure. So I started TQC around this time last year. Actually, we started trading. So prior to that, I was a VP of quality and risk for a CRO in the clinical research space, joining them as part of their growth process. So they were actually a startup as well. They'd just gone through series of seed funding when I joined them. I joined them quite early on in that process to help them build out their quality system. And it was going through that journey with them that really kind of sparked my interest in that startup culture. Prior to that, I'd spent 16 years working in larger companies, kind of 1,000 employee plus large pharma companies. So when I actually joined the startup, I'd been brought in off the back of another quality director who had come in to build out their management system for them. At the time, I think they were around 7 to 10 employees. His plan was to introduce 300 SOPs to build out that management system, and it would have just completely drowned them in bureaucracy, really. So that didn't work out in kind of that startup culture, and unfortunately he left, which was a great opportunity for me. So I was able to join their team, completely threw out the rulebook that he had built around what compliance needed to be for a startup. 3 months later, 30 SOPs, we were certified to ISO 27001 and ISO 9001. So from kind of a fresh start to being fully certified, that led me into really enjoying the fast-paced nature of startups and how quickly you can impact what you're doing with them. That was noticed by the co-founders of that company, and they actually introduced me to the lead investors that had invested in them. And under their umbrella of other companies, there was other startups that needed similar help. So I was then kind of sublighting it within that same company, helping other startups. That led me into realizing that there was a real gap in this space for being able to do what I do, implementing management systems, implementing compliance, but in that startup space. And that's kind of where it led to, really.
I think it's really interesting, that journey and the story and your rise through happenstance, essentially, in that startup, right? And it's really interesting that you mentioned that the person previous to you who brought you in was trying to run a startup based off of 300 SOPs, right? And with the new line of thinking now about lean startups and actually being very quick on your feet and actually understanding that what is right today for a startup is not going to be right in 3 weeks' time or 3 months' time or 3 years' time, and you have to move really, really quickly. I think it's really interesting that your approach coming in and understanding what the actual remit is of a startup and then going and applying that and getting those 30 SOPs set in place, but also understanding that the startup you're working with isn't the only one that's suffering from these issues. And so that there is born a company that can solve a problem that many maybe are experiencing at the moment. And so I guess you've worked in quality and compliance for over 16 years now. How does that experience translate into the way TQC supports its clients today?
I think for me, it's always been a case of wanting to be a true partner to them. So I don't see my consultancy in the traditional sense of you pay me for a piece of work, the team comes in and we do what we do and then we leave you to it. We actually want to take the time to really understand each startup, because as you mentioned a moment ago, each one is slightly different. The market they're working in is different. The resources they have, the potential kind of input from shareholders and all of these different things make up a real complexity. So trying to come in with AI generated SOPs or a really standard way of working, it doesn't really do them justice. So it's a case of, as I say, partnering with them, really taking the time to understand what they do, not trying to horseshoe them into a standard approach with compliance. And also, I guess, coming from that startup background, it's understanding that within a startup, people have to wear many different hats. So you may have a kind of a founder's associate who is also looking after compliance, risk management, jumping on sales calls. So it's understanding how to get them compliant, but not completely crippling them so they can't do the rest of their jobs they need to do to actually make that startup successful.
And it's interesting because it often feels like the job that everyone knows needs to be done, but is often put into a place where it's like, oh, but we're moving too quick. We got other things to do. And really having someone there to go, okay, well, what actually needs to be done is part of the battle that each startup has to face in itself. You mentioned briefly when we spoke previously that you won the 2025 Global Recognition Award. What does that mean for you and for TQC?
So for me personally, it kind of means I'm doing the right thing. So as I said, I was in a secure job, a kind of a six-figure salary in a company that was growing and was incredibly secure. I left that security to start my own consultancy, very much in an unknown if it was going to work, if it wasn't going to work. So the fact that we've kind of secured a number of clients, we've been able to really help them, and that's led us to win the recognition award for doing what we're doing. It means that it was definitely the right thing for me to do. And what TQC is doing is making a difference. What it's kind of meant for TQC in itself is I think it's helped drive the customer base. In the first year of trading, we've secured 14 customers. From those 14 customers, 90% of them have come back for additional work or additional services because they've seen the benefit in the way that we work, which has really helped that marketing. So I don't need to necessarily have a large marketing budget now because it's kind of organically growing, and things like this have definitely helped to drive that.
I think what you said really speaks a lot. I know it speaks a lot to a lot of our audience. The mere fact that when you do good work, you will get that work again, right? Or you'll get more work, right? And I think that the bedrock of any like sustainable and successful business is having a foundation of referrals that are coming in dribs and drabs that is allowing you to be able to go, okay, well, we've done really great work for our clients and our clients love it so much that we're able to bring in more work from other prospective clients, but also more work with the same clients, right? And naturally,
Exactly.
organically, the growth happens that way. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say that when it comes to kind of outreach to new customers, when you have to pay for like marketing budgets, Google ads and things like getting new customers can be expensive. So if you can show the real value to the existing ones that you have and kind of can really look after them so it doesn't stop when the paycheck stops, it's that continued support, that ongoing relationship that can be a huge differentiator. So sometimes it doesn't necessarily come back in kind of pounds and pence straight away, but it's that relationship, the fact that they may then go on to refer you to other customers or to their suppliers, or particularly in the startup network and culture, it's very connected. So if you support and help one company, it's quite likely they will speak to another. And if you've done a good job for them, that name comes up again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I always say as well, like with a lot of our clients, often they come to us when they've really been growing very well through referrals, but having the perfect marriage of marketing whilst also having an engaged client base as well is the key for scaling and growing the business, right? Having a method to actually go out and attract new customers through one channel, but also being so good with your operations and so good with the delivery that you're keeping the customers you have, keeping them happy and keeping them paying over a longer period of time. So 100%, I think, especially in the first year of trading, having that kind of success really is a marker of moving forward, especially from the risk that you've taken, leaving a six-figure job. And then it's not easy running a business. It's not easy to take that plunge and take the risk. But absolutely, if you do it and you do a great job, then the rewards are there for you.
Definitely. I think a few people thought I was crazy to do it to start with, but I think once it gets into that skin, that kind of need to do it, if you don't listen to it, eventually it will drive you mad. So
Exactly, exactly. It's like, I think Steve Bartlett used to say on his podcast that he used to have like a mental ideas shelf, right? And he would just put things on the shelf and he wouldn't act on anything straight away. But if after a week, a month, a year, the idea is still there on that shelf, then he would go, okay, well, that's important enough, or it's niggling me enough to actually, what is that? And dig into it a little bit more. And that's essentially entrepreneurship, right? And it's starting your own business. Sometimes, oh, I could do this myself. And it kind of is a niggle in the back of your head. And you're going, should I do this? Should I take the risk? Will I regret it if I don't? And before you know it, you take it. And of course, you're going to work more than you've ever worked before in a job, but it's more worthwhile in the long run. So I 100% agree with what you said there. There's a lot of firms offering compliance to consultancy these days. What makes TQC different?
I think the initial thing is definitely that true partnership. So when we look to implement, be it quality management system, information security, privacy, whatever it is, it's not a case that we just give you a load of SOPs and leave you to it. It's really partnering, understanding that how you operate, understanding where those gaps already are. It's not just AI generated text, because while that's good for prompting and kind of guiding what you're doing, it isn't necessarily how your startup's working. We don't just give you those documents and leave you on your own. It's a case of really understanding how to operationalize that, because I can give a company a change control SOP or deviation SOP, but if they don't know how to actually operationalize that, how to get the employees to engage with that, to buy into it, then you may as well go and buy one of these packs off the shelf that you can just kind of stamp from the company, that they don't help the organization. So it's really implementing it, kind of supporting you through from that initial idea of we need to be compliant for whatever reason, showing the benefits through to certification. And as I say, with 90% of our customers, it's gone on beyond that. So they've got that initial, we've needed this for this customer or for this investor to get this certification, but actually showing them the benefits after that. It's kind of build that ongoing relationship, really, where they now look to us to be that kind of beacon of what needs to be done and how they can use that to drive new engagements, new markets, new customers, or just when it comes to the next fundraising round, to have a more beneficial kind of offering at that point.
I think what you said there is really interesting. And I actually had a very similar conversation with one of our clients recently, and he was talking about the evolution of what consulting firms are and what consultancy is that nowadays. And once upon a time, consulting was essentially someone would come to you and you would advise them on what they should do, and then they would go away and do it. Times have changed, especially in the world where things move so quickly now, especially in the startup world, but most other markets are moving very, very quickly in terms of the AI adoption and technological advances and things like that. And so what's happened is companies are placing more value in that trusted partner kind of relationship, and actually the implementation side of things is like, yeah, you tell us what to do, but will you help us and hold our hands through the process of actually achieving what we want to achieve and speeding up that journey? And I think it's really interesting you mentioned that, because absolutely, especially in the startup world, things move so quickly. You need to be a trusted business partner to your clients to be able to go, okay, well, how are you going to implement it with the organization? How are you going to pitch this to your customer base, your employees, the team, the culture? How is that going to be affected by everything? And so, yeah, absolutely. There's a different element when it comes to that implementation and actually standing out amongst the crowd, for sure.
Exactly. It's no point having all of these documents if they sit on the shelf and no one ever looks at them again.
Exactly. Absolutely. So what kind of feedback do you typically get from your clients after they work with you?
So I think the initial engagement is they're quite often shocked, to be honest. So a lot of them have had some experience with compliance in the past and have either seen it as this thing that's full of bureaucracy or this thing that will inhibit how they're working. And quite often they don't really necessarily want to build compliance into what they're doing because they're scared it's going to slow them down, or it's going to add workload, or it's going to create barriers to what they're doing. So they're normally quite shocked when they realize that actually, if it's done well, it isn't any of those things. It's not a case that it's this bureaucratic thing that slows them down. It will actually enable them to communicate easily across teams. It will give them a common language that they can speak to their customers with in a way that they will understand. So it kind of really speeds them up in what they're doing. And kind of the best feedback I think we've got generally across the board is the fact that we've had so many referrals. So on the kind of TQC website, we've got this referral page or testimonial page where customers are always kind of saying the same thing. They're shocked of how quickly we did it. The time frame is unbelievably fast compared to what they were quoted elsewhere. The fact that we've got them into audits, they've come away with observations. They begin to really start seeing that actually compliance and quality isn't this big barrier to overcome. It's something that can support them.
Absolutely. And I think that's the biggest obstacle, bottleneck that you almost have to face when proposing your service or the consultancy side of things, because people will have a natural predisposition, as you mentioned, of, oh, this will slow us down. And if you come with the angle of, well, no, we're here to solve the problem of making things that you think are slow and make them much faster and much better, and actually give you actionable insights that can actually improve how you operate your business, that's a different question. That's a different statement. That's a different conversation, right?
Exactly. It takes them from that mindset of compliance being this bolt-on thing that we need because customer A has asked for it in an RFI, to being like, actually, this does increase this team's productivity. They're doing this quicker now, or we're having less defects, we're having less complaints, we're having kind of better relationships. And suddenly they start seeing that there is an actual return to investment on it. It's not a cost center as it's been perceived in the past.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you see as the biggest compliance and information security challenges businesses will face over the next few years? What's your opinion on that?
I think it's that typical conversation is everyone's having at the moment is AI and kind of what that can be. So be it machine learning, be it the AI in general. So it's something I have seen that from a quality perspective slightly infuriates me, I guess, and kind of worries me a little bit, is that some companies are using kind of generative AI to create their documentation, which doesn't necessarily reflect what they're really doing, but it's easy to put into ChatGPT what documents do we need for this? It will generate them. They stick them on the shelves. They never follow them. The flip side of that is they then automate a lot of the processes. The companies who are then assessing them on the other side be like, do I want to work with this company? Ask for an RFI, ask for the documents, and then they run that through another kind of machine learning tool to see if that company's compliant and they're one they want to work with. And at no point is any of that documentation really reflective of what's going on at all. So it's incredibly important to still have someone just check to see if that is that's really happening. Yeah, I think that's the biggest compliance risk that I perceive at the moment and kind of have started seeing happening.
I think that's it. It's AI makes a lot of the jobs out there that someone might feel like that can be sped up. People over rely on that and they don't actually sit down and actually think about what kind of effect it will have, right? And actually, it can speed up your process, but do you have someone there to check the work, right? Because at the end of the day, if you were working with a team, there's usually someone that will check. If it's someone junior and someone senior is there to check the junior's work. And so someone needs to be there to actually mitigate any risk that is involved, to be able to see if there's any issues that are being spat out by AI, because we all know AI, it can hallucinate and can very much lie for its own convenience. And so it's definitely something that most industries are struggling with at the moment. Everyone knows that they should be adopting AI and how should they adopt AI, but having an over-reliance on AI takes away from the actual essence of what your business is and what your organization does, right?
Exactly. I think, as you say, it's having that. If you use it as a junior employee to kind of do the initial prompts and create it, it's a great tool. But the one example that sticks with me, it's one I was reviewing where it was an approved document and we were heading into audit. I was following them through it. And the document they'd created with AI referred to a role that didn't exist. So this role that didn't exist was the approver for this particular process. And because they had assumed that AI had known what it was doing, that was the formal process. And like, if we went to audit with that, that would be a finding and a failure. But no one had seen it because they assumed that the prompt they'd give it was correct. And it's that kind of thing. It's just having that little bit of knowledge and having someone just read it and double check and be like, yeah, that kind of critical review, 90% of it was correct, but it only takes that little 10% to be wrong, and you can undervalue kind of the whole relationship, because if you don't trust that document, that process, it brings everything else into question.
Yeah, so true, so true. It's really interesting. I could speak about this all day because I think it's really interesting, but we have to jump into the next section of our podcast, which is called the Entrepreneur's Room. And that's a series of questions we'd like to ask all of our guests to give our viewers and listeners an opportunity to understand how business owners and business leaders think and operate when running their business. So at this stage of the podcast, I always like to ask the same question, which is, how are you currently spending your days as a leader of the business?
Yes, that's a great question as kind of a founder. So it's very, very split. And I think that's something you don't think of, particularly when you're starting a business. So I came into this as an SME in what I do. I can implement information security kind of management systems really, really well. And I know that particularly well. But as the company's grown, that became, well, I'm going to need to start learning to do marketing. So I'm having to set up SEOs and looking at the website and kind of pitching to customers, jumping on calls like this. Then as the team's grown and probably brought a head of marketing in to take over some of that work, but they've now started sending me documents to review and feedback on, and they're chasing me for a blog that we need to get out to do some marketing pitching that they want to do. And then there is obviously training of new people as you're bringing in new people, because it's incredibly important that they give the same level of service that I was giving to keep that high level of kind of what I want TQC to be. So there is some level of oversight and reviewing what's going on there. And then on top of all of that, you still have the day job. So I'm supporting a customer through their stage 2 ISO audit this Friday. So on top of doing all of this, it's a case of making sure that my customers are still getting what they want from me.
Yeah, it's the job of a founder, especially early in the business. You wear a lot of hats, you have to do a lot of things, and you have to do a lot of the things that maybe you wouldn't have done when you were an employee, right? When you were
Yes.
an employee, you would have done just servicing the client or servicing your employer. Now you have to think about so many other things that actually need to be dealt with. Everything is important, right? Everything is important. That's the difficult thing, is like, it's not about prioritizing. Like, yeah, you got to prioritize, but everything still needs to get done, no matter what.
Exactly. I think it's either a 9 or 10 on the importance list, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So as a business leader in your journey so far, what has been the most important metric for you when running the business?
For me, the most important metric is that repeat customers. So what I didn't want to do when I set out was to kind of implement a system and lead the customers to it. It's that return repeat customers. So the way I look at that is if they come back for additional work, it shows that we are doing something right, because quite often they didn't want to engage in compliance to start with. I always said TQC isn't the cheapest consultancy out there. There are others that potentially would be cheaper, but the fact they keep coming back to us time and time again, and some of them we're on kind of the 5th, 6th engagement for different things now, it shows that they're seeing value in what I'm doing and what the team's doing. So that is the most important one for me. Obviously, kind of runway and funding and stuff like that is critical as well. But I think that's a byproduct of that. If we've got customers who are happy, they're coming back, it doesn't matter about the runway, because that should in some ways look after itself.
Absolutely. And how are you currently, and obviously you mentioned a couple of points earlier, but how are you currently growing the business? What kind of marketing activities are you doing? You mentioned SEO and blogs and things like that. What other things are you doing at the moment?
So we did a series of videos, educational things. We're in the process of setting up a training academy. So as well as kind of charge services that we offer, there will be some kind of free training and things like that will help people, to give them the tools to be compliant. And that will hopefully begin change people's mind and bring them around. But the other side for us has largely been those referrals. So it's been a case of, I think all but 2 of the customers I've worked with have introduced further customers in that kind of startup infrastructure. So it's very much a case of word of mouth. So which has been great, because it keeps that advertising budget small. But there is, as I say, the kind of, my head of marketing is very focused on keeping weekly content and things like that going out into the social media, which is something I'm personally terrible at. I think that's something important as a founder, is to identify quite early on where my skills are and where they weren't, and having the right people to address those.
Absolutely. I think it's so important. Like, you're not on your own there. Like, content creation, like on a weekly basis, is easy. Everyone knows they're supposed to do it, right? But it's so hard to keep on top of it, especially if you're doing it yourself. And having a team that's able to handle that for you takes away the bandwidth off your shoulder and allows you to focus on the things that you're actually really good at, which is client work and actually running the business. I think it's a really important skill that a lot of founders struggle with, even later on in their journeys as well. So for sure. In terms of then the biggest lessons you could share with us today, I'm sure you've tried lots of different things. Many things hasn't worked out the way you maybe wanted it to, as it always does. What's the biggest lessons you can share with us today so far in your entrepreneurial journey?
I think it's such a cliche thing to say, but it really is true. It's, if you bring someone in because they're an expert in a particular area, it's to trust them to do the work. And a recent example is one of my biggest customers who we've been working with. I say this one, we've had 5 engagements. We've been working with them pretty much since day one when we started up. I had to hand over part of the work that we were doing to one of my consultants that were working with us, because they had an area of expertise in system validation, and that's what they were doing for them. My temptation was to really micromanage that and kind of hover over it, because this customer is important. I want it to be perfect. But I hired this person because that's what they do. They're good at that. I know they're good at it. I've worked with them previously. So it's stepping away and letting them do what they do, because otherwise, why am I paying them if I'm kind of doing it anyway? I'm trying to find the time myself.
I think it's such an important lesson, that, and I think sometimes, especially coming from being an employee to being a business owner, the difference there is the fact that As an employee, you're employed to do the job. And as a business owner, you're there to run the business. And understanding that running the business means that you have to trust in the people that you've hired to do the things that you've hired them to do. Obviously, there'll be a level of training, there needs to be a level of development, there's going to be mistakes made, but it's important to accept that to allow the business to grow the way it needs to grow, you need to allow the people that you've brought into the business to help run the business as well by doing their roles. And it's called a company for a reason, right? It's a company of people. It's a number of people that create that organization. So yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. And it's something I brought in from the company I was at before I kind of set TQC up. They really had a commitment to allow employees to have agency to make decisions and make calls. So it's something I wanted to bring with me because it gets that buy-in as well. So they're not just, they don't feel like they're just an employee and they're kind of restricted in what they're doing. They have the autonomy to make decisions, make calls. So they feel that it's their company as well. It's not just another job to them, which I think is important as well, particularly in that startup space where there is always something new and flashy around the corner that could tempt people away. So it's important to really make sure they are bought into what you're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Damien, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. It's been a great conversation. I like to end every single podcast with the same question. And that is, if you had a magic wand you could wave to solve one of your business problems, what would that be?
Oof, that is a great question because there are so many different things, as you say. I think for me, the biggest challenge at the moment is in relation to the perception of use of AI in this space. For me, that is when we're pitching to customers, we're no longer pitching or quoting against other consultancies, other experts. People are looking at kind of the £30 a month ChatGPT subscription, for example, and being like, well, why are we paying for consultancy services? If I could wave that magic wand and just give them the oversight of all of the additional benefits that you get, the operational aspects to it, the partnership, the knowledge, the 16 years plus of this worked, this didn't work, this went wrong. So they could see they're getting more benefit than just, well, the SOPs will be the same because you're not paying for those. If you think
Yeah.
you're paying for those, then you're buying the wrong service.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. I love it. Damien, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. You've been a great guest. Thank you very much for sharing your time today. For all those viewers out there that might want to reach out to you and get in touch, how would they find you? Where would they go?
So we're on LinkedIn. There's a TQ website, tqconsulting.com. Or if you Google myself, it should come up TQC.
Amazing. Thank you very much again, Damien.
Thank you, Dave. Lovely to speak to you.
Appreciate it.